Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a trip back in time, way back to a land not so far away, but certainly a time very different from our own. Imagine, if you will, that you're a medieval peasant, living a life dictated by the sun's rhythm and the turn of the seasons. You wake with the dawn, the air crisp and carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Your small cottage, built of wattle and daub, is humble but familiar, a haven from the biting wind. Outside, your chickens scratch idly in the dust, and the distant lowing of cattle signals the start of another day. You pull on your rough wool tunic, perhaps a bit scratchy against your skin, and step out into the early morning light. The dew still clings to the cobwebs strung between the thorny rose bushes you've cultivated, and the village stirs slowly around you. You trudge out to the fields, the familiar ache in your back already setting in as you anticipate a day of toil. The sun, a slow, patient artist, begins to paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, promising a warm day. You might exchange a few grunts with your neighbor, another peasant just like you, as you both head towards the communal fields. Life is hard, no doubt about it. Your diet is mostly pottage, a thick, often bland stew of grains and whatever vegetables you could scrounge up, with meat being a rare, celebratory treat. You might even chew on some stale bread, so hard it could chip a tooth, but it fills the void. Your days are spent in the dirt, planting barley, harvesting wheat, tending to the Lord's lands, often barefoot, feeling the cool earth between your toes. You know the cycles of the moon, the signs of a good harvest, and the best way to mend a broken fence. Your world is small, bounded by the forests, the river, and the distant, imposing walls of the Lord's castle. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Just a little reality check from your friendly narrator. But don't worry, we're just imagining it for now, so you're perfectly safe tucked in your bed. Life is predictable, if nothing else. Each day mirrors the last, a continuous loop of labor and simple pleasures. There's the village fair, a chance to trade your meager surplus, or maybe even see a traveling jester. There are feast days, when the Lord might provide some extra ale and a bit of roasted something or other, and you dance around the bonfire until your feet ache. You know everyone in your village, their quirks, their habits, their family histories stretching back generations. You've seen children born, watched them grow, and mourned those who passed too soon, which, let's be honest, was far too often. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly understood concepts of long-term planning beyond the next harvest, given the precariousness of their existence. Some scholars believe their lives were so dominated by immediate survival that abstract future considerations were less prominent. The smells of your world are earthy and raw. Damp soil, fresh dung from the livestock, the lingering smoke from the hearths, the faint scent of human sweat mixed with the sweet, cloying aroma of blossoming wildflowers in the meadow. It's a world without electricity, without plumbing, without the endless hum of modern life. Your entertainment is storytelling by the fire, maybe a rough game of knucklebones, or the simple joy of watching the clouds drift by. You cherish the small moments of respite, the brief conversations with loved ones, the taste of a ripe berry picked fresh from the bush. You're not thinking about global politics or philosophical treatises. Your concerns are immediate. Will the rains come? Will the Lord demand more labor? Will your youngest child survive the winter cough? A quirky tidbit. Some medieval peasants apparently believed that tying a knot in their shirt at sunrise would protect them from evil spirits throughout the day. Not sure how well that worked against an invading army, though. You live in a relatively peaceful time, for now. There might be minor squabbles between neighboring villages over land rights or a stolen pig, but nothing that truly threatens your way of life. The Lord's knights are there to protect you, in theory, from bandits and wild animals. You pay your dues, you work your land, and you expect to live out your days much like your parents and grandparents before you. There's a certain comfort in that predictability, even if it's a hard life. The rhythm of the seasons dictates your every move, and you've learned to read the subtle signs of nature, the flight of birds, the shape of the clouds, the way the wind whispers through the trees. You're part of a larger tapestry, a cog in the feudal machine, but a vital one nonetheless. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're back in the fields, the mid-morning sun warming your back. The rhythmic swing of your hoe is almost meditative, a dull, repetitive action that nonetheless requires your full attention. You hum a tuneless folk song, passed down orally through generations, its lyrics about love, loss, and the eternal cycle of the seasons. The air is still, save for the buzz of a few industrious bees and the distant bark of a dog. Life feels stable, secure. A little boring, perhaps, but boring is good when stability is your primary goal. You don't ask for much, just enough food to fill your belly, a roof over your head, and the good health of your family. You dream of a fat pig for the winter, maybe a new pair of shoes that don't pinch your toes, or perhaps even a pilgrimage to a local shrine if you can ever save enough pennies and get permission from the Lord. But then a ripple, a tremor in the carefully constructed pond of your predictable existence. It starts subtly, just whispers like dry leaves skittering across the courtyard. You're mending a fence, your fingers raw from the splinters, when you overhear two older women gossiping by the well. Their voices are hushed, their eyes darting around as if fearful of being overheard. They speak of distant smoke of villages to the east of something. Wrong. You shrug it off at first. There are always rumors, always travelers with tall tales. Sometimes it's a band of brigands, sometimes a rogue wolf. Nothing that concerns you, a humble peasant tied to your patch of earth. A day or two passes and the whispers grow louder, more insistent. The market day, usually a boisterous affair filled with haggling and laughter, feels subdued. Fewer carts arrive from the outlying hamlets. Those who do come have grim faces, their usual banter replaced by urgent, low-toned conversations. You hear fragmented words. Northmen! Fire! No mercy! Your stomach tightens, a cold knot of dread beginning to form. Northmen, the Vikings. But surely they haven't raided this far inland in centuries, have they? Or maybe it's another petty lord expanding his territory. You try to rationalize it away, tell yourself it's just fear-mongering, but the unease is a persistent hum beneath your skin. One evening, as you're sharing a meager supper of boiled turnip with your family, the village elder arrives at your door. His face, usually a roadmap of kindly wrinkles, is drawn and pale. His voice, normally strong and resonant, is barely a croak. He speaks of a messenger, breathless and terrified, who arrived at the Lord's castle earlier that day. The news is dire. An army. Not just a raiding party, but a full-blown army, marching steadily this way, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. They're burning crops, slaughtering livestock, taking what they want and leaving ruin behind. Your heart pounds in your chest, a frantic drumbeat. This isn't a petty squabble. This is something far, far worse. The children, sensing the shift in atmosphere, cling to your legs, their small faces mirroring your own fear. Your spouse's eyes meet yours across the flickering candlelight, a silent conversation of shared terror. What do you do? Where do you go? You're a peasant, you have no arms, no training in combat. Your only defense is your wits, your knowledge of the land, and perhaps a desperate prayer. A mainstream historical fact. During times of invasion, the immediate priority for many medieval peasants was simply to flee, often abandoning their homes and possessions, as they had little to no military means to defend themselves. The elder warns everyone to prepare. Prepare for what, though? You have nothing to prepare. Your wealth is in the soil, in the animals, in the few crude tools you possess. You can't carry your field on your back. You can't take your cow into the woods. The thought is paralyzing. You lie awake that night, listening to every creak of the cottage, every rustle of the wind. Your mind races, cycling through scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Do you try to hide? Do you run? Where? The forest is vast and dangerous, filled with wild animals and the unknown. The Lord's castle, usually a symbol of protection, now feels impossibly far away, and you know there won't be enough room for everyone. A quirky tidbit that might offer a tiny, morbid chuckle. Some historical accounts suggest that during invasions, peasants would sometimes try to hide their most valuable possessions, like a rare coin or a small piece of jewelry, by burying them in animal dung, hoping the invaders wouldn't bother searching through it. Imagine trying to explain that to your grandkids. The next morning, the air is thick with a palpable tension. The usual sounds of the village are muted. No one is singing in the fields. The laughter of children is gone. Everyone is moving with a grim purpose, gathering what little they can. You see neighbors hastily stuffing sacks with dried provisions, bundles of clothes, perhaps a treasured wooden carving. But even as they prepare, there's a collective sense of futility. What good are a few handfuls of grain against an army? Historians still argue whether the local lords had any effective communication systems in place to warn their peasants in a timely manner, or if it was mostly word of mouth and frantic last-minute messengers. It's hard to say how much time you truly had. You watch as a few families begin to head towards the edges of the forest, their figures small and vulnerable against the looming trees. A desperate migration has begun. You feel a pull to join them, but a part of you still clings to the hope that this is all a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe the army will pass by. Maybe they'll stop at the next village. Maybe your lord's knights will ride out and repel them. You grasp at these flimsy straws of hope, even as your instincts scream at you to flee. The smell of fear is almost a physical presence in the air, a metallic tang on your tongue. You look at your home, the place where you were born, where your parents lived, where your children have taken their first steps. It's more than just a structure. It's a lifetime of memories, of sweat and toil and simple joys. To leave it feels like tearing a piece of your very soul away. But the alternative is unthinkable. The image of flames licking at the thatched roofs, of foreign soldiers ransacking your meager belongings, of violence you can't even begin to comprehend. It's a nightmare made real. The decision, though agonizing, becomes clear. You have to go. You must go. Your family's survival depends on it. The air crackles with an almost visible anxiety. You can hear the panicked cries of children, the desperate shouts of adults, and the frantic barking of dogs. It's a symphony of fear, each note a stark reminder of the impending doom. You rush back into your small cottage, your mind a whirlwind of what to take, what to leave behind. Every object you touch seems suddenly imbued with immense weight, a painful reminder of the life you're about to abandon. Your eyes dart around the familiar space. The rough-hewn table, the few wooden bowls, the worn sleeping mats on the floor. Each item tells a story, and the thought of leaving them to the mercies of invaders is a fresh stab of pain. Your spouse is already moving with a desperate efficiency, gathering what little dried meat and hardtack you possess. You grab a worn wool blanket, crucial for the biting cold of the unknown nights ahead. Your children, wide-eyed and silent, help as best they can, stuffing a beloved wooden doll or a smooth river stone into a hastily prepared sack. There's no time for sentimentality, only for grim practicality. You consider your most valuable possession, a small, intricately carved wooden cross, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Do you risk carrying it, knowing it might be lost, or do you bury it, hoping to one day retrieve it from the ravaged earth? The decision is instantaneous. It goes with you. Some historians still debate the true value of portable wealth for medieval peasants, beyond a few coins or religious artifacts, as most of their assets were tied to the land. You remember the old tales, the ones whispered by the fire on long winter nights, about those who tried to hide, who thought they could outwit the invaders. They rarely fared well. The forest, though terrifying, offers your only chance. But what about the animals? Your scrawny cow, your few chickens. You can't take them. The thought of leaving them to be slaughtered, or worse, to starve, is heartbreaking. You have to let them go, set them free, hope they find their own way. It's a pragmatic cruelty, a sacrifice for your own survival. A quirky tidbit: Some desperate peasants would sometimes even attempt to disguise themselves as beggars or traveling mendicants, hoping to blend in with others fleeing or to evoke pity from the advancing forces. Not sure how successful that strategy actually was, though. The realization hits you like a cold slap. You are utterly vulnerable. There are no walls to protect you, no armor to deflect blows, no weapons beyond a rusty hoe or a dull knife, useless against trained soldiers. Your strength is in your hands, in your ability to coax life from the soil, not in battle. This is the raw, terrifying reality of being a medieval peasant in the path of war. You're not a knight, not a lord, not even a town guard. You're simply a body, a life to be taken or spared at the whim of others. Outside, the village is a scene of controlled chaos. Neighbors are helping neighbors, or at least those who haven't already fled. A cart creaks by, laden with household goods, its owners face a mask of despair. You see a family trying to coax a stubborn donkey, its eyes rolling in fear. The usual morning sounds of the village are replaced by the thud of feet, the rustle of bundled possessions, and the low, urgent murmur of voices. There's a shared understanding, a silent plea for collective safety. Everyone knows. Everyone fears. You quickly fill a small leather water skin, remembering the elders' grim warning about contaminated wells. You stuff a few dried apples into a pouch. This is it. This is all you have. Everything else, the cottage, the tools, the small garden you so painstakingly tended, it will all be gone. You take one last look around your humble home, the place where you built a life, where you dreamt your simple dreams. A lump forms in your throat, but there's no time for tears. The urgency is a physical push at your back. As you step out, clutching your child's hand, the air seems to hum with the vibrations of distant movement. Is it just your imagination, or can you actually hear the faint, ominous rhythm of drums, the murmur of many voices? You don't wait to find out. You join the stream of terrified villagers heading towards the edge of the dark, welcoming, terrifying forest. The only thing stronger than your fear of the unknown is your fear of what you're running from. This isn't a choice. It's a desperate instinct, a primal urge to survive. The air grows heavy, not just with fear, but with the dust kicked up by hundreds of fleeing feet. You join the ragged procession, a silent tide of humanity flowing towards the dark embrace of the forest. The path, usually a familiar route to gather firewood or hunt small game, now feels alien, menacing. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sends a jolt of adrenaline through your veins. You cling to your child's hand, their small fingers surprisingly strong in your grasp, their trusting gaze a heavy burden and a fierce motivation. The forest looms, a wall of ancient trees, their branches interlaced to form a shadowy canopy. It's a place of mystery and danger, a realm where stories of wolves and bandits abound. But now it's also your only refuge. You push through the undergrowth, the thorny branches tearing at your rough clothing, scratching your exposed skin. The ground is uneven, littered with roots and rocks, making each step a precarious dance. You stumble, recover, and keep moving, driven by the terrifying image of what you're leaving behind. A mainstream historical fact. Forests were often preferred as refuges during medieval invasions, not only for concealment, but also for their potential to provide natural resources for survival, like water and wild edibles. The sounds of the village, once so distinct, fade into a dull roar behind you. Now your world is compressed to the immediate, the panting breath of those around you, the frantic beat of your own heart, the rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot. You try to keep your footing, eyes scanning the dim light for any sign of a clear path. The air is cooler here, damp and earthy, carrying the scent of pine needles and decaying leaves. It's a primal smell, both comforting and unsettling. Your mind races, trying to remember every bit of lore you've ever heard about surviving in the wild. Which berries are safe? Which roots can be eaten? How do you find water? These are questions that until now were merely abstract concepts, part of the background hum of peasant life. Now they are matters of life and death. You realize how utterly dependent you've always been on the village, on the cultivated fields, on the predictable routines of your life. The forest demands a different kind of knowledge, one you possess only in fragments. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval chronicles mention peasants attempting to herd small livestock, like goats or sheep, into dense forest thickets in a desperate attempt to hide them from invaders, often leading to comical and tragic failures as the animals invariably made noise. Imagine trying to keep a nervous goat quiet while an army marches by. As the hours drag on, the initial panic gives way to annoying exhaustion. Your legs ache, your feet throb, and your shoulders protest under the weight of your meager pack. The children, bless their resilient little hearts, whine occasionally, but mostly they trudge along, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. You encourage them with soft words, with promises of rest, promises you're not sure you can keep. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any organized plan for collective flight, or if it was largely a desperate, every family for themselves scramble. You certainly don't see any coordinated effort, just individual groups pushing forward. The sun begins to dip below the treetops, casting long, eerie shadows through the dense foliage. The light fades quickly in here, turning the forest into an even more intimidating labyrinth. You need to find shelter, and soon. The thought of spending a night exposed, vulnerable to the elements and whatever creatures lurk in the shadows, sends a fresh wave of terror through you. You've always had the sturdy walls of your cottage, the warmth of a hearth fire. Now, you have only the deepening gloom and the unforgiving embrace of nature. You hear the distant, faint sound of human voices, not from your group, but elsewhere. Are they other fleeing peasants or something far worse? You freeze, pulling your family close, straining your ears. The sound fades, leaving only the rustle of the wind and the pounding of your own heart. Your paranoia is a constant companion now, a low thrumming behind your ears. Every shadow seems to hold a hidden threat. Every snap of a twig could be an approaching enemy. This flight isn't just about moving your body. It's about a complete mental shift, from predictable safety to constant, heightened vigilance. The light is almost gone now, swallowed by the dense canopy above. Panic, a cold, hard knot in your stomach, urges you forward, but exhaustion drags at your limbs. You stumble over a root, almost falling, and your child whimpers, their small hand slipping from yours for a terrifying second. You grab them tighter, your grip fierce and desperate. Finding shelter isn't just about escaping the cold. It's about hiding, about becoming invisible. Every sound feels amplified in the deepening gloom. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, even the frantic beat of your own heart. You scan the shadowy forms around you, desperately searching for anything that resembles refuge. A hollow log, perhaps, a small, rocky overhang. Even a dense thicket of thorny bushes offers some modicum of concealment. You can't build anything. You have no tools, no time, no energy for construction. You're entirely at the mercy of what nature provides, or rather, what it has already provided. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants fleeing conflict often sought natural shelters like caves, dense woods, or even abandoned animal burrows, prioritizing concealment over comfort or permanence. A few families ahead of you seem to be making for a slight depression in the ground, almost like a shallow gully, partially concealed by fallen trees. It's not ideal, certainly not the sturdy walls of your cottage, but it's something. You push towards it, your muscles screaming in protest, the children whimpering softly. The air grows colder, and a damp chill begins to seep into your bones. You pull the rough wool blanket tighter around your family, a flimsy shield against the encroaching night. As you settle into the meager shelter, you realize the ground is damp and cold. There's no fire. A fire would betray your position, its smoke a beacon in the darkness, its warmth a luxury you cannot afford. So you huddled together, your bodies pressed close for warmth, listening to the terrified breaths of your family and the distant, unsettling sounds of the forest. Every creak of a branch, every rustle, makes you flinch. Your imagination, usually a gentle companion, now conjures terrifying images of lurking soldiers, of hungry beasts, of the unknown. A quirky tidbit. Some accounts suggest that peasants would sometimes try to cover their tracks by walking backwards or dragging branches behind them, a desperate attempt to mislead any pursuers. Not sure how effective that would be against a determined patrol, but in the dark, any distraction is a hope. The hours stretch interminably. Sleep is a fleeting, restless thing, punctuated by sudden jerks and the terrifying thought that you've heard something. Your mind cycles through memories of your home, your fields, the life that was, contrasting it with the grim reality of your present. The fear is a constant companion, a heavy cloak draped over your shoulders. You try to reassure your children, whispering soft words, stroking their hair, but your own voice trembles with exhaustion and terror. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of such sudden displacement and constant fear led to widespread mental health issues among the survivors in the immediate aftermath of invasions. It's certainly taking its toll on you. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a primal aroma that signifies both refuge and vulnerability. You try to make your family as comfortable as possible, shifting stones, pulling the thin blanket tighter, but true comfort is an impossibility. Your stomach growls, a hollow ache that reminds you of the scarcity of food, a problem for tomorrow, but a problem nonetheless. For now, the only concern is surviving the night, unseen, unheard. As the first hint of pale light begins to filter through the trees, a sliver of weak dawn, you finally allow yourself a single, shuddering breath of relief. You made it through the night. But with the dawn comes a new wave of fear. What will the day bring? Will the invaders be gone? Or will their search parties sweep through the very woods you're hiding in? The forest, your temporary savior, now feels less like a refuge and more like a fragile, temporary hiding place. The first pale light of dawn brings not comfort, but a fresh wave of daunting reality. Your stomach, which has been grumbling in protest for hours, now aches with a profound emptiness. Food. You need food. The meager provisions you hastily grabbed are already dwindling. You can't stay hidden forever, and you can't survive on damp air and fear. The forest, which offered concealment, now demands a new set of skills, the art of foraging. You cautiously move away from your makeshift shelter, your eyes scanning the forest floor. Every leaf, every plant, suddenly holds the potential for life or death. You rack your brain for every scrap of knowledge you've ever absorbed from your elders about edible plants. You remember your grandmother's warnings about the red berries that bring sickness, the mushrooms that cause madness. This isn't a leisurely stroll. This is a desperate hunt for sustenance in a hostile environment. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants possessed an intimate knowledge of local flora and fauna, crucial for supplementing their diet, especially during times of scarcity or displacement. You find wild garlic, its pungent scent a welcome sign. A few patches of wild berries, though small and tart, offer a burst of flavor and a tiny flicker of hope. You dig for roots, your fingers clumsy in the cold earth, hoping for anything remotely edible. You know how to identify wild sorrel, its lemony tang a familiar taste from childhood foraged snacks. But the forest is vast, and food is scarce, especially in the early morning light before the sun has warmed the earth. Your children, their faces pale and drawn, watch you with hungry eyes. You try to find something for them, anything to quiet the gnawing ache in their small bellies. You find a patch of wild nettles, carefully, oh so carefully, you pluck the young leaves, knowing they can be boiled to make a nutritious, if bland, soup if you ever get a fire going. But for now, they are just green. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. Well, you wouldn't be thinking about that right now, but rather how to turn these nettles into something edible without getting a nasty sting. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval texts hint at peasants using hollowed-out gourds or large leaves to collect morning dew or rainwater, a desperate measure for hydration when no clear stream was available. You consider if this is a viable option for your parched throat. The search is slow, tedious, and fraught with anxiety. Every rustle in the undergrowth makes you freeze. Every distant sound sends your heart leaping into your throat. Are those soldiers? or just a foraging animal. You move silently, keeping to the shadows, your senses heightened to an almost unbearable degree. You're constantly aware of your exposed position, the vulnerability of your family. You are a shadow among shadows, hoping to remain unseen. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants often relied on cached food supplies in the woods for such emergencies, or if most flight was truly spontaneous and unprepared. You certainly didn't have any secret stashes of food, just what you could grab. This is raw survival, a return to the most basic human needs: food, water, and shelter. The simple pleasures of your former life, a warm hearth, a full belly, the comfort of a roof over your head, now seem like distant, impossible dreams. As the sun climbs higher, you gather a pitiful handful of roots and berries. It's not much, certainly not enough to sustain you, but it's something. It's a temporary reprieve from the immediate threat of starvation. You feel a brief, fleeting sense of accomplishment, a small victory in a world filled with overwhelming despair. But the hunger will return, and with it, the desperate search. The forest provides, but sparingly, and it demands constant vigilance. You are a hunter-gatherer now, albeit a reluctant and terrified one. The brief, unsatisfying sustenance from your foraging does little to ward off the insidious chill that now permeates your very being. As the sun begins its slow descent once more, painting the sky with fleeting hues of orange and purple, the biting cold of the forest floor becomes your most immediate tormentor. There is no hearth fire here, no crackling flames to chase away the damp. Your only warmth comes from the pathetic huddle of your family, their small bodies radiating what little heat they possess. You pull the scratchy wool blanket tighter, but it feels like a flimsy veil against the encroaching night. Every surface is cold. The rough earth beneath you, the bark of the tree you lean against, even the air itself seems to bite at your exposed skin. You shiver uncontrollably, your teeth chattering, and you can feel the tremor running through your children's small forms. Sleep, if it comes at all, is a fitful, shallow thing, broken by agonizing shivers and the dull ache of cold joints. You tuck your hands into your armpits, trying to preserve some core warmth, but the cold seeps into your bones, a relentless, pervasive enemy. A mainstream historical fact: hypothermia and exposure were significant threats to medieval peasants displaced from their homes, especially during colder months or prolonged periods outdoors. You try to remember the feeling of a truly warm bed, the soft straw ticking, the comforting weight of a quilt. It feels like a lifetime ago, a distant dream from a world that no longer exists. The ground is hard, unforgiving. Every knot and root seems to dig into your back, preventing any semblance of rest. You shift constantly, seeking a slightly less uncomfortable position, but true comfort is a cruel mirage. Your muscles ache from the day's desperate flight and foraging, and the cold only exacerbates the pain. A quirky tidbit that might offer a bizarre comfort. Some folklore suggested that sleeping directly on pine needles would draw out ailments, though you're pretty sure it's just making you colder. Still, you try to arrange what few fallen needles you can find beneath you, hoping for a minuscule layer of insulation. The long hours of darkness stretch out, punctuated only by the mournful hoot of an owl or the distant howl of a wolf. Each sound is a reminder of your vulnerability, your exposed state. You pull your children even closer, inhaling their familiar scent, finding a small measure of comfort in their proximity, even as their shivering bodies betray their own discomfort. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any rudimentary knowledge of building more substantial temporary shelters, or if most simply relied on natural cover and enduring the elements. You certainly don't have the luxury of constructing anything intricate right now. The cold also brings a new kind of discomfort, dampness. The forest floor is saturated with moisture, and your meager clothing offers little protection. You can feel the chill creeping up from the ground, chilling your legs, your back, seeping into your very core. You worry about your children, especially the youngest, whose breathing sounds a little ragged, a little too shallow. The fear of illness, of the cold sickness that often claimed lives even in the comfort of a cottage, now looms large. You spend the night in a semi-conscious state, drifting between fitful sleep and waking terror, your mind a jumble of fear and exhaustion. You dream of warmth, of a roaring fire, of a hot meal. Then you jerk awake, the cold a sharp slap to your face, and the grim reality of your situation floods back. There is no fire, no warm food, only the biting chill and the hard, damp earth. The rising sun, when it finally paints the sky with the promise of a new day, is a welcome sight not for its beauty, but for the faint hope it offers of warmth, of drying out, of simply surviving another frigid night. The chill of the night slowly recedes with the pale light of morning, but it leaves behind a hollow, aching void. Hunger. It's not just a grumble in your stomach. It's a pervasive, relentless ache that consumes your thoughts, making it hard to focus on anything else. Your meager foraging yesterday yielded barely enough to tease your appetite, and now, after a night of shivering and little sleep, the emptiness feels absolute. Every pang reminds you of the abundance you left behind, the freshly baked bread, the nourishing pottage, the rare but satisfying taste of roasted meat. You try to ignore it, to push it down, but the hunger is a persistent companion. It saps your strength, dulls your senses, and makes every step feel like an immense effort. Your head feels light, your vision occasionally blurs, and a dull throbbing starts behind your eyes. Your children, too, are showing the signs. Their usual youthful energy is gone, replaced by a listless quiet. Their small faces are pale, their lips chapped, and their eyes, once bright with curiosity, are now shadowed with a deep weariness. A mainstream historical fact. Starvation was a common and terrifying consequence of displacement during medieval invasions, as agricultural cycles were disrupted and food supplies destroyed or seized. You begin to move through the forest again, each movement deliberate, conserve energy. Your eyes, once scanning for threats, are now primarily searching for sustenance. Every fallen leaf, every patch of moss, every gnarled branch is scrutinized for a hint of something edible. You recall vague memories of your elders speaking of certain tree barks that could be chewed, or specific leaves that, though bitter, could provide some nutrients. It's a desperate education, learned under the harshest of teachers, necessity. A quirky tidbit, some medieval survival guides, if you could call them that, suggested grinding dried acorns into a flour-like substance for baking, but only after repeatedly leaching out their bitter tannins with water. Given your current situation, even finding an abundance of acorns, let alone the means to process them, seems like an impossible luxury. The irony isn't lost on you. Your entire life has been dedicated to cultivating food, to coaxing sustenance from the earth. You were a master of your small plot, able to feed your family with your labor. Now, you are a scavenger, reduced to scrounging for scraps in a wilderness that offers little in return. The contrast is stark, and it underscores the profound disruption of your world. Historians still argue whether the physiological effects of prolonged hunger impacted decision-making abilities and social cohesion among groups of fleeing peasants. You certainly feel a sense of irritable desperation setting in. Every small triumph, a handful of wild berries, a few edible roots, is quickly consumed, providing only fleeting relief. The hunger returns, a relentless tide. You begin to dream of food, vivid, tantalizing images of feasts and banquets. Your mind plays tricks on you, making you imagine the smell of roasting fowl or fresh bread, only to be snapped back to the harsh reality of the damp forest floor and the bitter taste of an unripe berry. This isn't just about the physical discomfort, it's about the mental toll. The constant gnawing hunger becomes a heavy weight on your spirit, making it hard to maintain hope. It weakens your resolve, makes you question how long you can endure. You try to reassure your family to keep their spirits up, but your own voice sounds weak, hollow, echoing the emptiness in your stomach. The landscape around you, once just a backdrop, now seems to mock you with its barrenness, its lack of easy food. You know that this cannot continue. A solution must be found, or the hunger will claim you long before any invaders do. The thought is a chilling one, a new kind of fear that mingles with the old. As the gnawing hunger persists, an even more insidious torment begins to assert itself. Thirst. The air, though damp in the shaded depths of the forest, offers no relief. Your throat feels parched, your tongue thick and heavy in your mouth. Your lips are cracked, and every swallow is an effort, a dry rasp. The subtle discomfort of thirst has escalated into a burning need, dominating your every thought. You find yourself licking your dry lips, a futile gesture that only highlights the desperate lack of moisture. The search for water becomes paramount. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from way back when. Well, right now, you'd probably trade it for a single, cool sip of fresh water. You scan the ground, desperate for any sign of moisture. A trickle, a damp patch, anything. You know that stagnant water can bring sickness, but at this point, the urge to drink is almost overwhelming. You remember your parents' warnings about drinking from unfamiliar sources, but the memory is fading against the burning reality of your present thirst. A mainstream historical fact. Access to clean drinking water was a constant challenge for medieval populations, and even more so for those displaced, making waterborne diseases a significant threat. You lead your family towards the faint sound of trickling water, a sound that, in your parched state, seems like the most beautiful melody you've ever heard. It's a small stream, barely a whisper over pebbles, but it's there. Your heart leaps with a desperate, fleeting hope. You kneel, pushing aside the fallen leaves and debris, and cup your hands, bringing the cool liquid to your lips. The first sip is pure bliss, a heavenly sensation that washes away the dryness, temporarily soothing the burning in your throat. Your children eagerly follow suit, gulping down the water with an almost savage thirst. But even as you drink, a new anxiety surfaces. Is it safe? Is this water clean? You try to remember the signs of good water, clear, flowing without strange odors. This stream seems clear enough, but doubt lingers. You know that unseen dangers can lurk in the most innocent-looking water. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a sophisticated understanding of water purification methods beyond boiling, which would be impossible for you right now. You simply have to trust your instincts and hope for the best. A quirky tidbit that's certainly not helping your anxiety. Some medieval superstitions held that certain springs were cursed or haunted, and drinking from them would bring misfortune or illness. You try to push such thoughts from your mind, focusing on the immediate relief the water provides. The thirst, though momentarily quenched, is a constant reminder of your precarious situation. You can't carry enough water to last, and relying on finding safe sources in a vast, unknown forest is a gamble. You're constantly aware of your body's needs, of its fragility. The fear of dehydration, of the weakness and confusion it brings, is a new layer of dread added to your already heavy burden. As you continue your journey, you find yourself instinctively scanning for signs of water, for greener patches of vegetation that might indicate moisture beneath the surface. Every dewdrop on a leaf, every raindrop that collects in a hollow, seems like a precious commodity. The thought of running out of water, of feeling that agonizing thirst return, is a terrifying prospect, one that propels you forward even as your body aches with exhaustion. The primal needs of hunger and thirst, though momentarily addressed, quickly recede into the background, replaced by an even more pervasive and insidious enemy: fear. It's a cold, clammy hand that grips your heart, a constant thrumming beneath your skin. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves, every distant murmur of sound sends a fresh jolt of adrenaline through your exhausted body. Your senses are on high alert, hyper-tuned to every perceived threat. You're a hunted animal, and the forest, once your refuge, now feels like a vast, unpredictable trap. You walk with an almost painful vigilance, your eyes darting from shadow to shadow, your ears straining for any sound that might betray your presence or announce the approach of danger. You see a flash of movement in the distance, a deer, perhaps, or a wolf, or something far more terrifying. Your breath catches in your throat, and you pull your children closer, their small bodies trembling against yours. The fear isn't just for yourself. It's a crushing weight of responsibility for their lives, their innocent vulnerability. A mainstream historical fact. The psychological toll of constant fear and uncertainty during invasions often led to long-term trauma and anxiety for survivors, affecting their ability to return to normal life. The silence of the deep woods, usually a source of peace, is now a heavy blanket, amplifying your own pounding heartbeat. You try to remember the peaceful moments from your life, the simple joys of a shared meal or a quiet evening by the hearth. But these memories are distant, fragile, overshadowed by the immediate, suffocating presence of dread. Your mind conjures vivid images of what could happen: capture, violence, the loss of everything you hold dear. You push these thoughts away, but they linger at the edges of your consciousness, a constant, chilling reminder of your precarious existence. A quirky tidbit that offers absolutely no comfort now. Some medieval peasants believed that carrying a dried mole's foot in their pocket would ward off misfortune. You're pretty sure a dried mole's foot wouldn't do much against a sword-wielding invader. Every time you glimpse an open patch of ground, or hear the distant cry of a bird, you imagine hidden eyes watching you, waiting. You tell yourself it's just paranoia, a trick of your exhausted mind, but the feeling persists. Historians still argue whether some peasant communities developed more sophisticated, albeit informal, warning networks or even rudimentary self-defense strategies in areas prone to frequent raiding, or if most were truly caught unaware and defenseless. You certainly didn't get a heads-up beyond frantic whispers. You try to make yourself and your family as invisible as possible. You move slowly, carefully, trying not to break any twigs or rustle the leaves too loudly. You instinctively seek out the densest thickets, the deepest shadows, anything that offers even a sliver of concealment. Your clothing, already torn and dirty, blends surprisingly well with the earthy tones of the forest. You're becoming a part of the wilderness, adapting to its rhythms, but always with the underlying current of terror. The nights are the worst. The darkness, already intimidating, becomes a canvas for your darkest fears. Every sound, no matter how small, becomes a potential threat. You cling to sleep, but it's a shallow, restless thing, punctuated by nightmares and the terrifying feeling of being watched. You wake often, heart pounding, listening, straining to discern if the rustle outside is just the wind or something far more sinister. The fear never truly leaves you. It is your constant, unwelcome companion, a heavy burden that you carry with every step, a grim reminder of how fragile your life truly is. As days bleed into nights, and the gnawing anxieties of hunger, thirst, and fear become almost routine, a new, more insidious threat begins to emerge from the damp, unsanitary conditions of your forest refuge: disease. It's not the sudden, terrifying strike of a soldier's sword, but a slow, creeping menace that weakens from within. Your body, already exhausted and malnourished, is a vulnerable host. You cough, a dry, hacking sound that rasps in your throat, and you hear similar coughs from your family. Your youngest child's forehead feels warm to the touch, and their eyes are unnervingly bright. You recognize the signs from countless villagers who succumbed to the fevers, or the fluxes in your former life, illnesses that even with the relative comfort of a home, often proved fatal. Out here, with no remedies, no clean water, and no shelter from the damp and cold, the threat is magnified 100-fold. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasant life was rife with disease, and the unsanitary conditions, lack of clean water, and exposure during displacement made populations incredibly susceptible to epidemics. The cuts and scratches from pushing through the undergrowth, once minor irritations, now fester, turning red and angry. You constantly worry about infection, a silent killer that can turn a small wound into a life-threatening ordeal. You try to keep them clean with what little water you have, but it's a futile effort. The air itself feels thick with unseen pathogens. You spend your days battling not only the elements and the constant threat of invaders, but also the invisible armies of bacteria and viruses that lurk in the damp earth, in the unwashed hands, in the shared, shallow water sources. A quirky tidbit that offers a grim chuckle. Some medieval folk remedies for fevers included things like drinking spiderweb dissolved in milk, or wearing a bag of dried toad entrails. You're pretty sure you'd pass on those, even in your desperate state. You notice a persistent looseness of the bowels among some of the other fleeing families, a grim sign of dysentery, spreading insidiously through shared water and poor sanitation. The fear that it will reach your family gnaws at you. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood the direct link between contaminated water sources and disease, or if they attributed illness more to bad air, divine punishment, or imbalanced humors. You certainly didn't have a modern understanding of germs, but you knew what conditions led to sickness. The days become a blur of feverish worry. You watch your children constantly, checking their breathing, feeling their foreheads, listening for any telltale cough or whimper. Every sneeze, every shiver, every sign of weakness sends a jolt of terror through you. You've left your home, endured hunger and thirst, and lived with constant fear, but the thought of losing a child to a creeping illness, helpless and alone in the wilderness, is almost unbearable. It's a slow, agonizing form of torture, watching for symptoms, waiting for the inevitable. Even the simplest acts, like eating your meager foraged food, become fraught with risk. Was that berry truly safe? Did you wash your hands well enough, even with scarce water? The knowledge that a single wrong choice, or simply bad luck, could bring sickness and death, weighs heavily on your spirit. This invisible enemy, silent and pervasive, is perhaps the most terrifying of all because you cannot fight it with a strong arm or a quick escape. You can only endure and hope. Amidst the crushing weight of fear, hunger, thirst, and the lurking specter of disease, there are moments, fleeting and precious, when a small victory shines through. These aren't grand triumphs, but tiny glimmers of hope that momentarily push back the encroaching despair. You find a patch of wild onions. Their sharp, invigorating scent a welcome change from the damp earth and decaying leaves. It's not a feast, but it's a taste, a small burst of flavor that reminds you of a life that wasn't defined by constant struggle. You manage to fashion a rudimentary shelter beneath the sprawling roots of an ancient oak tree, using fallen branches and a few large leaves to create a more sheltered space than your previous damp hollow. It's still cold, still hard, but it offers a bit more protection from the biting wind and the incessant drizzle. For a short while, you can almost imagine it as a temporary home, a safe haven. Your children even manage a faint, tired smile, their small faces briefly illuminated by the success. A mainstream historical fact. Despite overwhelming hardship, medieval peasants often displayed remarkable ingenuity in adapting to adverse conditions, improvising shelters and tools from available natural resources. One afternoon, while searching for firewood, a dangerous luxury as smoke still poses a risk, you stumble upon a small, hidden spring, its water bubbling clear and cool from the earth. It's a pure source, untouched by the churn of many feet, and you fill your water skin with a sense of profound relief. This clean water is a treasure, a bulwark against the dysentery that has plagued other fleeing families. It's a quiet blessing, a reminder that even in the darkest times, nature can still provide. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval superstitions held that finding a four-leaf clover, or even a particularly smooth, perfectly round stone, could bring good fortune and ward off evil. You might instinctively pick up a smooth stone you find, rubbing it between your fingers, clinging to any small symbol of hope. These moments are brief, fragile. The hunger returns, the cold persists, and the fear is never truly absent. But for a few precious minutes, you allow yourself to breathe, to savor the small triumphs. You watch your children as they manage to chase a butterfly, their laughter, thin and weak, nonetheless a melody in the otherwise silent forest. It reminds you of their resilience, their ability to find joy even in this desolate existence. Historians still argue whether such small moments of success helped maintain morale and psychological well-being among displaced populations, preventing complete despair. You certainly feel a tiny lift in your spirit. You share a piece of the foraged wild onion with your spouse, a silent gesture of solidarity and shared survival. It's a moment of connection, a reminder that you are not alone in this ordeal. You recall remembering that crocodile dung sunscreen and laugh, a dry, humorless sound, at how trivial your concerns once were. Now, finding a clean water source feels like discovering a king's ransom. These fleeting victories, though small, are vital. They are the tiny pinpricks of light in the overwhelming darkness, providing just enough motivation to keep going, to face another day, another night. They are proof that you are still capable, still resourceful, still alive. They offer a thin thread of hope, a desperate belief that perhaps, just perhaps, you can endure this and emerge on the other side. Days, perhaps weeks, have blurred into an agonizing continuum of flight and fear. The immediate, terrifying sounds of the invading army have faded, replaced by the persistent, anxious silence of the deep woods. But the silence itself is a new kind of torment. What does it mean? Have they passed? Have they left? Or are they still lurking, their presence hidden, waiting? The impulse to return, to see what remains of your home, becomes an irresistible pull, a desperate yearning for certainty. You decide, with a group of other weary survivors, to make the cautious journey back. Each step is filled with apprehension. You move like shadows, your senses heightened, straining for any sign of life or indeed any sign of devastation. The forest, which once felt like an enemy, now offers a fragile sense of security, its dense foliage a familiar shield. But even as you leave its embrace, you feel vulnerable, exposed once more. A mainstream historical fact. After an invasion, peasants would often return to their villages to assess the damage, a harrowing process that determined their immediate future. The landscape begins to change. The wild, untamed growth of the deep forest gives way to more familiar signs of human activity, albeit grim ones. You see trampled fields, their crops flattened and broken. A discarded tool, a broken wagon wheel. Each object is a somber clue, a fragment of the life that was. The air itself seems different here, carrying a faint, acrid scent of smoke, long since dissipated but still lingering in the memory of the air. It's the smell of destruction, of loss. As you approach the outskirts of your village, your heart pounds with a terrifying mix of dread and hope. You tell yourself to expect the worst, to prepare for utter ruin. But a tiny, stubborn part of you still clings to the impossible dream that somehow, miraculously, your home might have been spared. The first sight is of a ruined fence, then a collapsed outbuilding. Your breath catches. This is it. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval records indicate that returning peasants would sometimes bring a burning ember from a fire they had managed to keep alive in the woods, hoping to reignite their hearths and symbolize the continuity of their home. A small ritual, perhaps, in the face of overwhelming destruction. You walk into what was once your village, and the sight is a punch to the gut. The silence is deafening, broken only by the mournful creak of a loose shutter or the distant caw of a crow. Homes are blackened husks, their thatched roofs gone, their wooden frames charred and crumbling. Your own cottage, your humble haven, is a gaping wound in the landscape, its walls partially collapsed, its interior a charred mess. The hearth, where so many meals were cooked and so many stories told, is a pile of cold ashes. The despair is overwhelming. Years of toil, generations of work, reduced to rubble in a few terrifying days. Historians still argue whether the initial shock and despair of seeing their ruined homes led to immediate migration for some peasants, or if the deep connection to their ancestral lands compelled them to attempt to rebuild despite everything. You stand there, numb, the smoke-stained air burning your eyes. There are no signs of life, no familiar faces, only the ghosts of what was. The reality of your loss is stark, undeniable. You pick through the debris, a futile search for anything salvageable. A cracked pottery shard, a blackened piece of wood from your table. Each object is a relic of a vanished world. The only thing that truly matters, your family, is safe beside you, but the cost of their survival is laid bare in the ruins of your home. The return was necessary, but it offers little comfort, only a profound sense of emptiness. Now the true battle begins, the battle to rebuild not just your homes, but your lives. The acrid smell of burnt timber and the haunting silence of your ruined village are a constant, painful presence. But amidst the desolation, a primal instinct stirs, the urge to rebuild. You look at your family, their faces still etched with weariness, but now also with a glimmer of grim determination. There's no lord here to tell you what to do, no grand plan from a distant castle. This monumental task falls to you, to your neighbors, to the resilient few who have returned. The sheer scale of the destruction is overwhelming. Every structure needs to be rebuilt, every field replanted, every tool replaced. You start with the most basic needs. First, clearing the debris. You and your neighbors, gaunt and tired, begin the arduous process of moving charred wood and fallen stones. It's backbreaking work, but there's a shared purpose in the silence, a common goal that binds you together. Your hands, already calloused from a lifetime of labor, ache with renewed effort. A mainstream historical fact. The recovery from medieval invasions often involved immense communal effort, with surviving peasants pooling their labor and resources to rebuild their villages. You scavenge for anything salvageable. A broken piece of pottery might be mended. A rusty axe head, though dull, can be sharpened. Every scrap of metal, every usable piece of wood is a treasure. You begin to understand the true meaning of resourcefulness, making do with what little you have. There's no time for despair. There's only the endless, demanding work of reconstruction. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval villages, when rebuilding after a major fire or invasion, would sometimes incorporate foundation stones from the old ruined buildings into the new ones, a symbolic gesture of continuity and resilience. You might find yourself doing something similar, picking up a blackened stone from your former hearth and placing it carefully in the foundation of your new, rudimentary shelter. The fields, once your source of livelihood, are now barren and churned. They need to be cleared, the soil turned, new seeds sown. But where will the seeds come from? Your own stores are gone. You rely on the generosity of slightly less damaged neighboring communities, or on the faint hope of finding overlooked caches of grain. It's a gamble, a race against the seasons, for if you miss the planting window, the next winter will be even harsher. Historians still argue whether the widespread destruction of agricultural resources after invasions led to long-term famine, or if communities could generally recover their food production within a few seasons due to rapid replanting. Your new home will be even simpler than the last. Wattle and daub, yes, but smaller, perhaps less sturdy. There's no time for ornamentation, only for function. You learn to make do with less, to live with the bare minimum. Every nail, every piece of rope, every untangled knot is a small victory. You're rediscovering ancient skills, the very foundations of human ingenuity, stripped bare of comfort and convenience. The days are long, from dawn until dusk, filled with physical labor and the constant drone of insects. The nights are still cold, But now you have a crude, smoky fire, its warmth a comfort, its flickering light a symbol of rekindled hope. You share stories, not of your suffering, but of your resilience, of the small triumphs of the day. The memories of the invasion still haunt your dreams, but the waking hours are now dominated by the tangible effort of rebuilding. You are not just building homes. You are rebuilding a community, brick by painful brick, crop by precious seed. The seasons turn, slowly, painstakingly, bringing new challenges and new hopes. The brutal winter gives way to the tentative greens of spring, and then the vibrant bloom of summer. You watch as your newly sown fields begin to sprout small green shoots pushing through the turned earth, a miracle, a testament to your unyielding labor. The village, though still bearing scars, starts to hum with a fragile new life. Smoke rises from newly repaired hearths. The distant sound of hammers rings out, and even the hesitant laughter of children begins to echo through the rebuilt lanes. The wounds of the invasion are deep, and they will never truly heal. You carry the memories, the fear, the losses etched into your very being. But you also carry the resilience, the strength forged in adversity. You learn to appreciate the smallest things, a full belly, a warm fire, the simple comfort of your family sleeping soundly nearby. These are no longer just aspects of life. They are precious gifts, hard-won and deeply cherished. A mainstream historical fact. Despite the devastation of invasions, medieval peasant communities often demonstrated remarkable resilience, rebuilding their lives and livelihoods, though the process was long and arduous. You see your neighbors, gaunt and weathered, but alive, working alongside you. There's a new bond among you, a silent understanding forged in shared hardship. You've faced the abyss, stared into the face of utter destruction, and collectively pulled yourselves back. This is not just about physical reconstruction. It's about the rebuilding of spirits, the reaffirmation of community. You know that crocodile dung sunscreen trick. Well, now you'd laugh at how worried you were about superficial things when you've faced truly existential threats. A quirky tidbit that reflects this resilience. In some areas, after devastating raids, peasants would sometimes adopt new, more adaptive farming techniques or even communal defense strategies, learning from their bitter experiences. You might find your own village subtly changing its ways, becoming more vigilant, more self-reliant. The future remains uncertain. You know that another invasion could come. The world outside your small, rebuilt village is still a dangerous place, but you have survived. You have faced the worst and emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. Historians still argue whether the experience of surviving such profound trauma fundamentally altered the collective psychology of medieval peasant societies, making them more fatalistic or more pragmatic. You certainly feel a shift within yourself, a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life. The rhythm of the seasons reasserts itself, bringing with it the familiar cycle of planting and harvesting, of living and dying. Life goes on, not as it was before, but in a new, more profound way. The scars remain, a constant reminder of what you've endured, but so does the indomitable spirit that allowed you to overcome. You are a testament to the enduring strength of humanity, to the stubborn refusal to be extinguished, to the unwavering will to survive and thrive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And now, as the last embers of our story fade, feel the gentle weight of your blankets, the distant sounds of your own home, the soft hum of your surroundings are a comforting presence. Let the worries of the day drift away like smoke on the wind. Close your eyes and allow the quiet rhythms of the night to lull you. Your journey through the past is complete. Rest now deeply and peacefully.